when a peace negotiation was in process. And during that time, they decided to create a new type of being on the planet that would be a mixture of reptilian and human.
And this was prior to the devastation.
Right, this was prior. This was an attempt at peace between the two.
Okay.
And the thing is, the deal was the reptilians wanted to take the foundation as the androgynous reptilian body and then add mammalian or human genetics to it. And now this is interesting because in the Bible it says, and people never question this, it says in Genesis, let us make man in our image. And so why is it plural? Who is the we and who is the our? And in ancient Hebrew, all references to God are plural. There are no singular references to God as an individual. It is always plural. And if you look at the way human beings gestate in utero, you see that in the first few weeks of life, they are basically androgynous reptilians. And then mammalian features are added to it during the gestational period. And that's because the genetics are following the sequence in which they were added. So all we have to do is look at how human fetuses develop to see how we start as androgynous reptilians and then finally become mammalian.
Could this genetic manipulation, could that have been where the story of Adam and Eve occurred?
Absolutely, and the allegorical story of how Eve was created from the rib of Adam is basically about how an androgynous reptilian body was broken down into male and female components. That's an allegorical story of Adam and Eve.
Should have asked one of our guests last night who believes he's the reincarnated Adam.
I see. Well, we all are in some way, aren't we?
Yeah, I guess we are. Okay, so some of the stories that we hear about in Genesis, the fallen angels, the taking of women, earth,
Yes.
That could have been the reptilians coming down to interbreed, right?
Correct, and even the Hebrew word Elohim means those who descend from above.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reference to basically, that's what we would call people that come down in spaceships.
Okay, how many reptilians fled underground after the devastation? What do you think?
My estimate, or the estimate that we've been told over the years at Montauk, was approximately 3 million. But I can't verify that number, obviously. That's just what we were told.
Okay.
And that they did, because they're androgynous, they replicate on a parthenogenic basis. They don't need any spouse. They just create during a cycle and give birth.
Are they underground now?
Yes, they are still there. And, if you look at current events and you look at China and other areas where all of these mining accidents are occurring and people are dying underground, I know that a lot of those mining accidents are cover stories about what's going on underneath the ground where the reptilians are battling human beings. And this occurs even here in North America, where we have over 130 underground bases in this continent, and there's a lot of battling going on under the ground, especially in the Mojave.
Are there flying crafts still around that belong to the reptilians?
Yes, there are, and I do have to say that a large percentage of the so-called UFOs that we see that are reported in this planet, many of them come from here. There are not so many from elsewhere, but many come from from our planet.
Who has the higher technology, the reptilians or Earthlings, I guess?
Both. We have government craft, and we also have the reptilian craft. And we have, of course, a mixture of others that come here. But for the most part, there's only 4 or 5 alien civilizations now that interact with this planet that are allowed to come here. There used to be a lot more years ago, and that's been stopped because of the government taking over a lot of the control systems of interactions with aliens.
Are we interacting now with the reptilians, or are we at war with them?
That is a very good question, because the Illuminati, who are basically the descendants of the hybridization program, have their own agenda, and their agenda is a bit different than the original reptilian agenda.
Okay, so we're getting into a little David Icke a little bit, right?
Yes, his information is very good. He's a friend of mine, and we've talked about shape-shifting and how it occurs. if you'd like, I'll give you a brief description of shape-shifting. When a person has a split of 50-50 genetics, in other words, 50% reptilian, 50% human.
God, what would you look like at a 50-50 split?
Well, that's the thing, is what would the genetics defer to? It goes by the mind pattern or the soul personality operating the body. So, for example, if you have a reptilian soul personality in such a body, the body would defer to reptilian genetics and manifest as a reptilian. If you needed to hide behind a human form, and you needed to be in public as a human, but you had this reptilian body, the only way to maintain the human form is by ingesting human hormones, blood, organs, etc., that would then jump or boost the human genetics to manifest in that form instead. And that is why many of these Illuminati societies have these sacrificial rituals or sexual rituals where they bring up the human harmonics or energies so that they can maintain the human form.
Some people I've looked at have what I've always thought to be reptilian-looking eyes.
Yes.
Can they, these shapeshifters, can they hide the eyes?
Yes, they can, but when they get very angry or they get very intense, the eyes shift. And you can see this a lot.
They get yellow or they get black.
And they look like slits, instead of the round pupils. And you can see that this happens sometimes on TV. If you look at sometimes some of the government officials when they're speaking, on occasion you can see that happen briefly. And you have to ask yourself, and you look at all these skin conditions that these leaders have, where suddenly they're going to the hospital, getting skin lesions removed, et cetera, and that's when you shapeshift frequently. The body then starts to lose the genetic memory of what shape am I. So very often when they go back to human form, there's a spot or two here or there that maintains reptilian form, and then they have to cover that up.
Give me a painted picture here, Stuart, of what a reptilian looks like.
There are...
I'm picturing a crocodile. Maybe that's not right. Huh?
Well, that's not exactly right, but we know that there are 7 different species within the Draco Empire or hierarchy. And interestingly, when the Soviet Union sent a vehicle to Venus in the 1980s to actually go below the cloud layer and shoot pictures before the heat destroyed the camera,
right,
it sent back a picture of the surface with 7 domed areas in a row.
We never saw those pictures.
We didn't see the pictures, but in American newspapers, there was an article on it in the late 1980s that said that there were these 7 domed areas, and it went on and on to describe them as being unusual. And then the very end, as a par for the course, it said that NASA determined that these 7 domed areas were natural formations. Of course, they're not going to say what they really are. If you know about reptilian culture and you know about the 7 species and there's a hierarchy, they don't mix together, it would make very good sense that when you colonize an area, you have separate living quarters for each of the species. And so the different species look like the very high or elite group are very tall, white-skinned reptilians with blue eyes, and they sometimes have been known to have wings on the back.
Reptilian-type skin?
Yes, it's not exactly as scaly as you would see on a crocodile or an alligator, but it's very rough skin that looks as if it's segmented in places.
What about their faces?
The faces can look very human-like or humanoid. They have 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, but the reptilian have that what I call cat eyes. They look like cat eyes, and they have a very pronounced jaw and very pronounced teeth. And they have very powerful bodies, especially the elite group, the top of the hierarchy. And when you go down the hierarchy to the bottom, there's a shorter version. There's a kind of reptilian that's only 4.5 feet tall. It's kind of brown skin, very slight. They're very much like workers or drones that would do the grunt work or the what we would call the untouchables in Hindu society.
All right. Well, this picture that we've all seen of the devil, who could have been a reptilian. Where did that come from, the longer tail and the horns?
That comes from the ancient perception of what a reptilian being looks like. And very often they do have horns. Not all of them do, but some of them do.
Maybe a senior group or something like that?
The middle version, there's a warrior caste that tends to have